Welcome to Armchair Expat, the podcast meant to get you out of your lazy boy and into your new life abroad. I'm Shannon Acton, founder of Bargain Homes Abroad, and I'm riding shotgun as we chase the dream of life beyond borders. Each episode, we'll hear stories from people who've left their comfort zone to explore the world. They'll share their highs, their lows, and their in-betweens, all meant to lovingly light a fire under your bum, so you can stop dreaming about it and start living it. So if you're stuck in your comfy recliner, scrolling through dreamy destinations, wondering what if, it's time to swap that raggedy old armchair for a one-way ticket. Let's freaking go, people. When it comes to reframing the expat narrative through the lens of identity, wellness, and purpose, Christine Job leads with substance and soul. Christine is an award-winning storyteller, strategist, and media entrepreneur exploring the intersections of migration, Blackness, womanhood, and wellness. She's the creator and host of Flourish in the Foreign, a celebrated podcast that uplifts the voices of Black women thriving abroad and reimagines living internationally as a path to wellness and liberation. Christine's podcast has released over 150 episodes, earned global recognition, and created space for a deeper, more nuanced narrative around Black women's experiences abroad. In this episode, Christine shares her own powerful story, from law school and burnout to walking the Camino de Santiago to landing in Spain on what was supposed to be a short sabbatical and never leaving. We talk about the unlearning that happens when you step outside the grind, what it means to flourish in a culture rooted in rest and community, and how living abroad gave her the space to become both more creative and more herself. I hope you enjoy this special episode. But first, before we dive into our conversation with Christine, I want to announce we have a very special new sponsor, Quiero.com. So go ahead and listen to this promo, and I'll see you on the other side. If you're dreaming of life in the sun, maybe a characterful little house in one of Andalusia's Pueblo Blancos, a lavender-scented gîte in rural France, a rustic farmhouse in the hills of Tuscany, or a beachside apartment in Portugal's glittering Algarve coast, you need to know about Quiero. Quiero is a place to find your dream home abroad, with over 700,000 properties across Spain, Portugal, France, and Italy. From chic city lofts to rustic fincas and even historic chateaux, Quiero makes it easy to explore incredible homes all in one place. And it's not just listings. Quiero is also packed with expert advice to guide you every step of the way, from picking the right location to navigating visas and citizenship and settling into your new lifestyle. Plus, if you sign up to their emails, you'll get a weekly dose of inspiration straight to your inbox. Think sunlit French estates with working vineyards, serene wellness retreats in Spain designed for solo living, charming Portuguese quintas perfect for your retirement dreams, and historic villas with pools in the hills outside of Rome. You'll also find themed guides like the best places to buy if you're a wine lover, plus the latest property market insights from local experts. Everything you need to plan your escape with confidence. So, if you're ready to swap your Pinterest boards for plane tickets, visit Quiero.com, Kyero.com, and start your search today. That perfect place in the sun? It's waiting for you. And now, on to the show. Hello, Christine. Welcome to the Armchair Expat podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. I'm really excited to chat with you, and I'm just really, really feeling fortunate to be able to speak to you and your audience on this platform.
Oh, thank you. I'm super excited to have you here. It's an honor to host you, and I'm going to be honest, I'm like super nervous. You're a podcaster. I'm interviewing a podcaster. It's like, there's a lot of pressure here.
That's the great thing about podcasts is that we understand everything that goes into it. So I feel like we're like the best guests because we're like, whatever happens, happens. And we're cool with it.
Okay, well, you've put my mind at ease. I appreciate that. So why don't you tell us where you're from and a little bit of your background, and then we'll get into why you're here on the podcast and where you moved to abroad.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Christine Job. I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I have a whole crazy story about how I went abroad, but basically I'll say this, is that I found myself in 2017 burnt out from law school. from starting my own business and being somewhat successful. I can't say it was a gold star success. And I found myself just needing a break. And so I went on a sabbatical here in Spain and I never left. And it'll be 8 years in August. So that was like my brief kind of summary of who I am and where I'm from.
Did you always have the dream of going abroad, or was it something in 2017 that said, yeah, I got to get out of here for a little bit?
I always tell people that I really think it was embedded deep inside of me because my father's an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago. His mom immigrated first in the 70s, left him behind on the island while she kind of figured it out. And I always say my mom and her family, although they're from the United States, I always call them a small nomadic tribe of women. Like they had no problem getting up and going, whether it be New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, to California, to Georgia. They were like, whatever suits us, we're going to go do. So I really felt deep within me, I always had that type of movement spirit, we'll say. I'll also say that my parents divorced when I was quite young. My father was stationed in the military in the Air Force in Germany when I was about 9 or 10. So I've been internationally traveling solo since I was about 10 years old. So I think that helps as well, kind of like putting in, like planting the seeds of like migration and things like that. And then, after like visiting my dad a couple times in Germany and going to Paris and Austria and spinning around in Austria, singing Sound of Music, those types of things, I kind of knew by the time when I was 17 that I wanted to live abroad for at least like a year or two. That was a goal of mine. I never thought I would live abroad for so long, but that was a goal. And then when I went to university, I studied abroad actually in the city that I live in, Valencia. So it's a very full circle moment. I did that for about a semester. And then after I left, I didn't have like the best time also to study abroad. Like I know some people are like, study abroad was the best thing I did. And I was like, it wasn't at all what I expected. And yet I didn't let that taint my experience of life abroad. I kind of just felt like, oh, now my eyes are really open to this experience and I will try something different. And so I did that. And all of those experiences, I think, influenced me greatly into wanting to live abroad. But it wasn't really until I think it was about 2013. I had just graduated from law school and I was working at a startup in downtown Miami. And we went on a business trade mission to Namibia and South Africa. And I met the then US ambassador to Namibia, who was this like incredibly regal Black woman. And intellectually, I knew that Black women could be US ambassadors, but I had never met one. And when I met her, I was like 24, 25. It was just life changing. The entire trip was very life changing, but I was like, I got to go abroad. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I got to go abroad. It's definitely a mixture of all of these different experiences throughout my life that kind of led me to now being here in Spain for almost 8 years.
What a great story. I'd love to hear more about from the time you made that decision to go abroad. What was the process that you went through? How long did it take from the time you decided, like, I'm not really feeling it here in the States and I'm not really being fulfilled to actually landing in Spain?
It took years, to be quite
Okay.
frank, because in 2014, I'm a year out of law school. I'm kind of did the startup thing. I thought I wanted to work for myself, but then I was like, I want to work abroad. And so I interviewed and I got a position for another startup that was based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And so I moved all my stuff into my mom's house because that was like the staging, place to get like my visa and things like that. But then that job fell through and I was devastated. I had gone on like a farewell tour. I was like, bye, friends. I don't know when I'm going to see you, but I'll see you later. I don't know. And so I was like devastated and super embarrassed because I thought I was going to go and I didn't. And so that was, I think, July 2014. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. And somehow, some way, I went on a hike in the Kennesaw Mountains of Georgia. And what came to me was I should walk the Camino de Santiago. Now, in 2014, that was not a popular thing to do. I think the movie for that's very popular, had just come out and I hadn't seen it. And I had a friend who had really wanted to do it. I think that's why it was planted into my mind. And so I first ignored it because I was like, that's crazy. I wasn't an outdoorsy person at all. I was outdoorsy in the way that you have brunch on a terrace, or like you go on a hike, like the one that I was on, where you drive somewhere, you get out your car, you walk on a trail, 30 minutes max, you come back, you drive away. Like that was the extent of my outdoorsiness. But this hauling, I guess, would not leave me alone in a way that to this day, when I reflect on it, is like very strange because I had never experienced that before. And so it happened for a couple of days. And I was like, okay, I'll look it up. And I looked it up, and this was back when, there wasn't all these like very fancy websites for the Camino Santiago. It was like forum, like old school forum. And when I understood what it was, an 800-kilometer trek across Spain, I was like, oh, I can't do this. I'm like, I'm only a single woman. I can't do this. What could happen to me? And of course, like I scroll some more and I see there's these chats with these women who are like 86 years old, and they're like, this will be my 15th Camino. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't let like these grandmas outdo me. Like if they can do it, clearly I can do it. And clearly I'm being called to do it. And so I went to REI because I was like, well, if I go to REI, they'll tell me I can't do it and then it'll be done. I went to REI and they were like, you could definitely do it. Let's outfit you. And then my friend who originally wanted to do it, she was like, you have to meet this guy called Camino Tom. And I was like, Camino Tom, what? This is very strange for me. I don't know what this is. She's like, you have to meet him. He runs the Atlanta chapter of the Pilgrims. And I was like, Pilgrims? Like I knew nothing about this thing. And so I meet him. I think I text him and he was like, meet me at this location and I'll give you some stuff that you need. Okay. I go to the location. It's a hospital. I'm meeting him in, I guess it was outpatient surgery waiting room. Like his ex-wife was having surgery and he was like, yeah, it's gonna be 4 hours. Come down and like meet me. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. He was like, you should definitely do it. He had I think it was a cross of St. James. He took it off of his neck, put it on mine, gave me some euros, and then gave me like a packing list. He was like, Buen Camino. Mind you, I had only gone, like, I was doing these things just to be like, I'll just see what it is. And every step, it just was a confirmation that I should go do this thing. And so I did it. I lost the job in early July. Um, and by August, I was on a plane to Bordeaux to start the Camino Santiago. It was scary. And I bring it up just because every day leading up to going to the Camino, I cried. I cried like horribly, and I'm not a crier. Mind you, I'm staying with my mom. So my mom is like, you don't have to go. You have to do this. And I was like, I have to. I'm being called. And so I go to Bordeaux. I don't speak French. I have a complete like panic attack in the bathroom. I'm like, I can't do this. I suck it up. I figure out how to get on the bus to get to the train station, to get to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, to get to the Camino office, to get to the first albergue. And I was off. And I walked the Camino for 33 days from San Jean, it's the Camino Frances route, to all the way to the Atlantic coast of Spain to Finisterre. And I bring that up because not only did I see how beautiful and just geographically diverse Spain is, but it was such a life affirming experience that after that, and even during it, I was like, I can do anything. Not in the like arrogant American way that I think we're socialized, like, yeah, I can do anything. But like, I deeply, deeply felt I could do anything. I just needed to literally walk in the general direction of that thing and take it one step at a time. And that experience changed everything because after that, although I had horrible tendonitis in my feet because I did not prep for this at all, I was like, I'm moving to Spain and that's it. However, it took me a while to actually make that move because I came home, I think October 2014, and I didn't move to Spain till August 2017. I think a big part of that was I had a very specific way I thought I should move to Spain. Like, I was like, I need to get a corporate career or something. And I was like, but you're an entrepreneur. And I really tried to like figure it out, which ultimately I think was a godsend because I met a lot of interesting people in the meantime, between time. But eventually I got to the point where I was like, I just need to go because I know deeply that if I go, I'll be able to figure it out. And so I applied for the Auxiliar de Conversación program, which is a language assistant program here in Spain. And I think it was 2017. I decided to do that. I was like, I've never taught children before in my life, but I just need to get on the Spanish soil and I know things are going to work out for me. And so in August 2017, I moved to Spain, first Barcelona, and then to the region that I was assigned, which was the smallest comunidad or state in Spain called La Rioja. And I moved to the capital, which I use loosely because it's more like a town. And I started my adventure that way. And it's been interesting to say the least after that.
I don't even know where to begin unpacking that story. Was there a time when you were on that trail that it really just hit you like Spain is the place I want to be? Or was it kind of when you got home and you're like, I want to go back, I'm being called? I'm curious, like, was there a lightning rod moment at all?
Yeah, when I was on the Camino, I was just seeing how beautiful, especially northern Spain, because that's where the Camino Frances goes through, how beautiful Spain was as a country. And I'd been to Spain many times before. And I just thought to myself, if I did this on a whim, I could move here. And I wanted to move because I just felt that there was, I know a lot of people say like it's a slower pace of life, but I would say it's a more intentional pace of life. It's a more rooted pace of life. People aren't just like, lazing about. That's not like the culture here. It's just that they have very strong priorities in family and friends, in community. And that's what is paramount. And after I really experienced that, by going through, the villages and the towns, by meeting Spanish people on the Camino, I just felt deeply like this was what I wanted to do because at home, it was a very, I mean, fast paced isn't really how to describe it. It was a grind, right? I come from law school, which is, they're like, yes, you will be ground into powder, but you'll be paid well, hopefully, because all lawyers are paid well, right? And then I decided to start my own business, and that was a grind. And I just felt deeply, I was like, I just don't feel like I'm meant to grind, which is different from working hard and or going through the natural discomforts of becoming as a business owner, as a creative, or what have you. But I just didn't feel like I wanted to grind. I didn't feel like I wanted my health, physical or mental health, to be the sacrifice to the success gods or whatever that is. And so I think it was during the Camino that I was like, I could do hard things. This is a hard thing, but I just don't want to be burnt out. And at the time, burnout wasn't like a buzzword. So I didn't even have the language around it. I just knew like I think I was always saying I didn't want to feel as if my soul was being sucked out of my body. I was saying to my friends, like, I just didn't want to feel that. And so it was definitely on the Camino where I was like, there's a different way to live life. And I want to do that.
So once you got your assignment in Spain, how long was that time period? And then once it expired, how did you get to stay in Spain?
So the Auxiliar program is a program that goes up on the school year. So it's about 9 months. But your visa, I think, is good for probably 10 or 11 months. And so I moved to Spain. We'll have to say this. Before I moved to Spain in August 2017, I had come to Spain in April 2017 on a very spontaneous whim. Promise everyone, I'm not a very spontaneous person at all. Like, this is all very shocking how my life is like unfolded. But on that trip in April 2017, I came to Spain just to visit and then to Italy to visit some friends. And I met a man. I did meet a man and we started a relationship. And so by the time my first visa was expiring and I was living in La Rioja, he was based in Barcelona. So I moved to Barcelona to be with him. And in Spain, there's a variety of different type of relationship visas you can have. You can have a marriage visa. You can have a pareja de hecho, which means like an established relationship visa. And so I got that and I was able to stay in Spain on that visa, not being an auxiliar de conversación and actually being able to work remotely for a US company when I moved in 2018.
Okay. And so is that what was your did you go to work for a US company then, or did you kind of start your own thing? When did that transition?
So after I worked for I did the auxiliar de conversación, I actually met one of my dear friends still to this day who was working at a web development firm in DC. And through her, she was working remotely. I got a job with the same firm. And so right as that was ending, I was picking this up and I worked at that firm for about a year. And then after that, I started my own thing. I'd already had a consultancy in Atlanta and I was picking it back up. So yeah, by the time it was 2020 that I picked up my own thing again. Excellent timing for a pandemic to happen, I guess. But then that's how I kind of been able to kind of work throughout those years.
It's so interesting. It's like you speak of timing, and it feels like everything that has happened since 2014 has all been perfectly timed, right? Like just situations present themselves. You took obviously a huge, huge step and initiated it by following that call to go on the trail, but then everything just kind of lined up after that. Do you ever think about that, or can you explain that?
First time I thought of it that way. And I think it's really interesting because I think in hindsight, you're like, everything works out. But while you're in it, you're like, it feels so insanely chaotic in a way that is only like amplified because you're outside of your home country. So you're like, this is insane. I'm living in an insane way, especially because I come from like law. So things are like buttoned up. So I'm like, I'm just living life where I'm like, this is fine. This is fine. This is fine. I'll figure it out. And it's like, yeah. But upon reflection, I think I'm able to have much more gratitude for how things worked out. And I think that has to do with probably serendipity, but also to give myself credit. Like, I think I was really hard on myself. Definitely those first couple of years, probably still right now, but about trying to figure it out and making it work and things like that. And I did make it work. I did work it out. And that's nice to think of because it's really hard when you're going through it. You don't really take a lot of time to pat yourself on the back for you made it through. You went to the immigration office, and even though your appointment was at 11 and they saw you at 1, you should be grateful because they were going to close the office at 2 p.m. and go home. Like you don't have those kind of little wins. It maybe, hopefully for those listening, something that you can take is like celebrate yourself obnoxiously and at every point because you need it, right? Because although living in Spain has been such a blessing. I really love Spain. I love the culture, the people. It's not a perfect place. It has politicians, so there you go. It's not going to be a perfect place, but it's given me so much, and I don't know if I've really reflected on how much it's given me throughout the years and how much I've been able to make it work and to cultivate a really beautiful life. So thank you for that question because I haven't thought of it like that.
Now that we're reflecting on that, what have been some of the biggest shifts in you as a person since moving to Spain? And is it because of where you are or just because of your growing as a person in general?
Wow. It's probably a mixture of both. But I think one of the biggest shifts for me is that I'm not a money chaser anymore, right? I think people, no matter how like crunchy you are, if you are from the US, we are taught to be money chasers. I'm not going to say money is bad because I don't think it's bad. And money can buy you happiness. Okay, this is not going to go all the way left. I'll give you an example. I remember when I first moved and I was living in La Rioja. La Rioja is a small comunidad. In Logroño, it's its capital. It's more like a town. And there's the Spanish siesta. And in theory, you're like, yeah, this sounds so great. We're all going to take a nap. And then you realize the Spanish siesta is like a suggested amount of time. It's not everyone takes it at the same time. And not everyone opens up their business at the same time. And back in 2017, pre-pandemic, like Google Maps and having those listings were very much suggestion in Spain. A lot of businesses didn't have their listings and they didn't have it updated or anything. And so I remember being like, yeah, okay, once siesta's over, I'm gonna go do this. And I'd go someplace and it'd still be closed. It's like 5 o'clock. And I'd be like, but why is it still closed? Siesta is over. What's going on? So I open Google Maps and it's a business before there. So it's like the current business is not even listed at the same address. So I'd be like, what is going on? Or I'd go to a place and they just have like a piece of notebook paper saying oh, I'm taking the day off for rest and just stick it there. And you're like, right? And my first inclination was like, these people do not like money. How, like, you care about a business like this? And, you know, I think it was a reflection on a society that has um, higher taxes for sure, but they have social safety nets for people. And those taxes really give you something, right? You have nationalized health. If you lose your job, you've been paying into the Social Security. They have unemployment. Unemployment can be like up to 80% of what your last salary was for like a year or something. And then there's also training that goes into it. Like you could go and take free classes to get recertified. There are all these festivals and holidays, which also was hard for me to understand. I was like, so what are we celebrating? People were like, why do you need to know so many specifics? Just celebrate, go home, go to sleep. And I'm like, yeah, but why are we celebrating? Like, why is everything closed? Like, so I'm in a society that values collective safety, collective well-being in money. And I'm not saying that Spanish people aren't ambitious and they're not people that are all about getting to that next euro, but it's definitely different. And that has changed me a lot, I think. I still have financial goals I want to hit and things like that. But how I sit and rest in myself when it comes to money and when it comes to business is very different. I'm looking to have a business that has amazing impact. Like that's my biggest thing. I want to impact people in a positive way, in a substantive way as well. And I also want to be well. I feel like I don't want to work myself to the bone because I don't have any interest in it. I do work on days that, Spain has a holiday because I'll be like, well, I didn't put it in my calendar and I have a meeting. So womp womp. But like that has been the biggest difference for me. It's just my relationship to work and to money. And I think that sometimes Spain gets a bad rap, especially in Europe. They're like, oh, Spaniards never work and da da da. Look, stereotypes do come from someplace sometimes, but I don't feel like it's because people don't want to work or they're lazy. I really feel that people are like, this one life that I have, I rather do other things and I'll make this money. And as long as I can live well, whatever that definition is for you too, I'm going to do that. So some people work more or differently and some people don't. And I think that has been the biggest change I've seen in myself for sure. And I think that has mostly to do with, living here in Spain. I don't know if it's necessarily specific to Valencia or Barcelona or Logroño, but I think it has to do with the evolution of who I am, right? I moved here when I was 30. So all of my 30s is here. I launched my business or relaunched my business, and I've launched another arm of business and a creative endeavor here. So all of those things have been formed by living here in Spain and me wanting to still live a nice life. I'm still ambitious. I still like to do things, but still wanting to have a very beautiful life.
It sounds like there's a lot more balance and a shift in priorities and values, right? And I think that what was coming to mind my whole time is Americans are just now learning, or some of us are just now learning, like what boundaries really mean. And it doesn't come from a place of just it's an innate thing. versus in Spain, it sounds like it's much more innate. Like it's not even a concept; it's just ingrained in the society and the culture, and it's more natural to have more of a harmony and not going back to what you were saying of that grind, that hustle culture. It's just not. Um, it's not
Yeah,
a part of it.
I think also a big thing is that work-life balance, like that concept in Europe now it's a word or a phrase or something, but it's not, I won't say it's not necessary because people are like fiercely protective over their time off, right?
Mm.
I think it comes to this, which is wellness here in Spain is not something that people think they need to consume, right? I think wellness in the United States is something that is very consumption driven. I need to be well, so I need to buy something. I
Hmm.
think in Spain, it's mostly about this wellness is about I need to experience something. I need to take time off. I need to have Sunday dinners with my family. I need to go out into nature. I need to go out and, live. Like Spanish people are very social. Everyone's always outside. Like you have parties inside, but mostly it's like outside. We have great weather, so that's helpful. But you're outside, you go to the bar, you go to a terrace, you go on a walk and things like that. I'm sure people do buy things for wellness, but I think intrinsically that's a big difference. Yeah.
I feel like my mind just like mind blown. That's such a great way to encapsulate what the difference in the cultures, like the consumption versus just the innate everyday wellness is part of being a well-rounded human. And it just is versus, trying to find it or search it out or, pay for this program over here or all these supplements. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless actually at that. And you can't really put your finger on something like that unless you actually experience another culture and see the differences and have that insight. And I think you bring such great insight on that.
Yeah, because I think that's where societal pressure comes into play, right? I remember my first year here, I wasn't feeling very well and I was working in the school. So, of course, kids and their seriously sticky hands. I'd be like, why is this hand sticky? And one of the teachers was like, why are you here? Go home, go to the doctor. And I was like, no, I'm fine. They're like, no, go home. I'm like, I just have a little sniffle. They're like, go home. And that was really hard. And something that a couple of my friends have discussed is like, we don't use our health insurance nearly enough, right? The type of visa that I'm on, I have private health insurance, but I also am eligible for public health care as well. And I still don't think I use it enough because I think it's like a deprogramming that still is in process of being like, I should go to the doctor. Well, I feel fine, but it's like interesting because I think our tolerance for um, pain or discomfort, like just not being well, is so high in the United States that it's hard for us to register that we should be taking care of ourselves throughout. Like it's not being wasteful or strange, or you're not being a hypochondriac, Like you could just go to the pharmacist and be like, oh, this is how I'm feeling. And they'll give you something um, very natural too. I remember the first time I wanted to get something that was similar to Benadryl, and they were like, and I brought the box and they were like, you don't need, this has all these other things you don't need. You just need this. And I was like, but I think I want all the stuff that's in this Benadryl. Like I want the sleepy stuff too. And they're like, no, 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 no. You take this and you have some tea and that's fine. So um, it's a different way to think about wellness. It's a different way to be, but societally, like there's a pressure for that doesn't exist in the United States. So it's hard. And to your point, the boundaries you have to set have to be your own, right? Like you can do this in the United States, but you have to say to yourself, I'm okay with redefining what wellness and success is in the face of a culture that's like, who are you? What do you do? So I can just determine how much respect or how much time I'm going to give you, right? You have to be able to really stand in that. Spanish culture is, I mean, people eventually ask you maybe what you do, but it is not the thing, where people are like, oh, you're a garbage man. I can't talk to you. Like people have very full lives outside of what they do. So I think it's a holistic type of thing, like with wellness. It is professional wellness, it's financial, it is physical wellness, but I think being in a society that has a type of peer pressure for you to take less emphasis off of what you do and more emphasis on who you are, and especially who you are in community, that really makes a difference.
Wow. It is a huge difference because I'm just thinking about, going to meeting people in public. It's always kind of one of your first questions. Oh, what do you do? And it's kind of a conversation opener. So I'm just curious in Spain, like, what are those conversation openers? What are they asking you rather than what you do if it's not important?
Well, I stick out in Spain. So there are not a lot of black black people. I mean, there's more in like Madrid, like in the big cities, and there's a lot of migration from Morocco, from other parts of Africa, all over the world. But, like, I stick out. I have like copper locks, so people are like, "You, who are you?" And when I start speaking Spanish, they're like, "And you have an accent." So the first question is always, "Where are you from?" That's what they want to know. They want to know where I'm from. They want to know why I'm here. And they always want to know, like, if my hair color is natural, which I'm like, look, that's a bridge too far. It looks great, so it is natural. I bought it, so it's natural. It's like those types of things. People want to know, like, what am I doing here? Where do I live here? Things like that. And depending on, other contexts, like if I'm at a jazz bar, things like that, then there's natural questions. But generally, people don't ask me like what I do. Sometimes they'll ask me, like, they'll be like, "Oh, are you a digital nomad?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Oh, okay, then you're okay." Because there's a lot of,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, there's a lot of negative sentiment towards digital nomads. But mostly they just want to know where I'm from and why I'm in Spain. And that's always a very interesting thing because I always say, I never say like, "Oh, I'm American." I always say I'm from Atlanta. And for me, like, that's my litmus question because depending on if they know of Atlanta and how they know of Atlanta tells me a lot, right? So if they're very well traveled, they'll be like, "Oh, Atlanta, I've flown through, but I've never been to the city." Or they might be like Coca-Cola. Or if they're young, they'll be like, "Oh, the TV show. Yes, I know this," or sometimes if they're like very into American culture, they'll know like Real Housewives. And I'll be like, "Oh no, this is not good." So yeah, that's how the conversation usually is. But even if we talk about what I do, it's not, I don't know, it's not a big focal point. I don't feel like people are like, "Oh, well, this is who you are." I feel like people are genuinely interested and they're interested in the journey that I've I guess partook in, I don't know, to get to Spain and why, and mostly also they want to know why I've stayed too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So why have you stayed?
Oh gosh, last year was, I guess it was like the 7-year itch that I was like, why am I here? What am I doing with my life? What's going on? And I just think it's part of also like coming into like my late 30s. I was like, what am I doing? My friends live this life. And I was like, yeah, but you didn't want that life at all. You don't want it. Uh, I think I've stayed in Spain because I really love the community that I've cultivated here. And I'm really grateful to this country because I've been able to live in a way that I have been able to become a creative in this country. I've been able to launch a completely different brand. I've been able to become different or maybe just another part of myself and be able to express that through podcasting. And I think that is something that I don't take for granted. And I'm pretty sure that maybe I could experience it in other parts of the world, but I don't think I could if I went back to the US or Atlanta. And some people might think that that's ridiculous, and that's fine. I still have friends 8 years in who are like, "But when are you coming home?" And I still have friends who are like, "I know this really great pediatric doctor that I would love to, set you up with." And I'm like, "He's a doctor licensed in the state of Georgia. Like, I live here. Like, what are we talking about?" Like. So I think I've stayed because this has given me the space, the true space. It's freed up the time, the energy, the resources for me to even deeply contemplate what I really want in this life, which isn't static, right? It's dynamic, but it's also giving me that space to then work towards that and work towards that at a pace that is sometimes feverish, but that's mostly me. That's nothing to do with anyone else is like, pushing me. but it's allowed me to take the time to try to create something and launch something, which takes time, as you know. Like it's not linear at all. And I think that's why I stay in Spain. I think that's why I've been here, is that I just really appreciate that. I'm really grateful for that. And also, I would say that throughout the pandemic, which I was in Barcelona for, it was really heartening to see community come together in a way that I wasn't seeing on the television that was happening in the United States. I was like, this is, we all don't know what's happening. Like, let's all take care of each other. And in Spain, it's like the first impulse, right? Here in Valencia, there was a horrible flood in October and devastating. Here in the city center, we weren't affected, but just, right across a bridge, it was like destroyed. And it took a while for the government to get it together. There was already, I mean, as soon as it happened, there was infighting between the president of the Comunidad and the prime minister of Spain, and they're trying to politicize it. And people were like, they got their shoes on and they went and started helping immediately, before the army could come, before anyone else could come, which was dangerous because there was a lot of sewage and there was all those other problems. But like, people just got up and went. And that type of true community, it makes me feel safe, right? It makes me feel safe in a way that, yes, there's like the crime here is nothing compared to like Atlanta or something. Like I can walk the streets at like 3 a.m. It's fine. But like that type of community, that's a safety that I just didn't know that I needed. And I definitely need that. And I think that's also why I stay.
I am very curious, as you went to law school, and that's, typically not a very creative field from the outside. It's like, oh, that's very kind of linear and it's very, rooted in a lot of fact and a lot of cerebral. Have you always been a creative? And did you always know you wanted to use maybe that background in law or your education to create something creative? I'm curious how that kind of mixes together.
I will say that I never considered myself a creative, but I think I think it's because of how the US education system is set up, especially I think back in my day, where it was very like analytical or creative. And creative kind of meant like you couldn't sit still in class and you were like all over the place. And it's like, I always wrote stories and wrote songs and things like that. But I wasn't necessarily discouraged, but I wasn't necessarily encouraged to do it as well. I was a really great test taker. I love to read. I love to write essays. So that was like always very much pushed on me. I think that while in law school, I did have a concentration in intellectual property. I took an art law seminar. I thought I wanted to be an entertainment attorney. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I feel like my interest in media has always been there. But, when I started my podcast, I did not think that any of my law background was relevant to it because it felt so crazy. I just felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to study something. I need to take a course. I need to do this. And you don't need to do any of those things to start a podcast, as we know, which is fortunate and also unfortunate, right? Like the bar's a little bit low to enter into podcasting. So it's like, you get it, whatever. Upon reflection, I think my legal background helped me to really think through what I wanted to create in a intentional way. I guess my legal background and my business background. Like before I launched the podcast, I did competitor analysis. I listened to a lot of the podcasts that were already out to see if I liked them, if they were doing the thing that I wanted to do, because if they were, I was like, well, I don't gotta do it. Great. I'll listen to this podcast. And I think that helps me to then create something that is rich and has a very clear point of view. And so I think all those things helped me in the creation. But it was a mess. Launching this podcast was a mess. It was, if anything, being a lawyer was a detriment because I felt so out of my element. I felt it was just like so messy. And I was like, I hate this being messy. I hate this being janky, but that's just what it is when you start. And so, yeah, I think it's been both a benefit and a detriment as I've launched and grown Flourish in the Foreign.
Well, let's talk about your award-winning podcast, Flourish in the Foreign. What was the idea behind it? I would love to hear more about kind of how this all came to be.
Yeah. So I wanted to create Flourish the Form because, hopefully, unlike the listeners out there, I really thought moving abroad was going to solve all of my problems. It doesn't. It doesn't. I really thought that like if I went abroad, my life would just miraculously change and that I would just thrive. This image of myself would just happen. And it didn't. And I was really concerned. I was like, why is this not happening? And I was encountering Black women in Barcelona and also online who were living abroad. And I would, chat with them and they'd have these incredible stories that felt like they felt like a missing piece of the puzzle. Like I felt like, okay, there's something here, and I wanted to share them. I also I have to be frank, I would find myself in social situations, not with Spaniards, but with like other non-European passport holders that really made me think, like I need to create this. So a story that I tell people is that, I worked in startups. I went to a startup event in Barcelona. I was not really impressed, but I was like, let me try to like network or whatever. And this white Australian man comes up to me and he was like, "So, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm just here to listen to these pitches, like whatever." And he was like, "Yeah, but like, what are you doing in Spain?" And I'm like, "Living." Like, I was just like, "Living." He's like, "No, but like, how? Like, how?" And I was like, "What do you mean, how? You're non-European. Like, I'm non-European. It's the exact same amount of effort for us to both migrate here. Like, I'm just living my life." And he was just like, "It's just like so interesting. Like, you're here." And I read into that. The subtext was like, "Oh, this Black American woman, what are you doing here?" And I was like, yeah, because at the time, a lot of the media around either being digital nomad, even being an expat, was very white. It was like not seen, maybe even in travel. Black people don't do that. And it was like, Black people, yes, we do this. Like I'd been all around the world. I was like, what are you talking about? And I just kind of reflected on that. And I was like, I wanted to create something that preserved and amplified the stories of Black women because they were never going to be center stage in mainstream media. And honestly, that's actually a benefit, right? Because I find when Black stories are centered in mainstream media, there has to be some sort of strife, some sort of like tragedy. That's the only way that our stories get really put into mainstream media. And there's always a caveat if it is extraordinary. It's like, well, it's always the first. And I'm like, all right, like I'm not interested in that. I wanted to create something that was also an archive of sorts for Black stories because as history is written by the victor, a lot of Black stories are bastardized, not only in the United States, but across the diaspora. And I didn't want in like 100 years, probably some white British dude on some documentary or whatever Netflix looks like in 100 years to be like, and back in 2020, migration looked like this, and it totally didn't talk about Black women or anything. I was like, I just rather not. I rather capture these stories. And so it was a combination of that, of wanting to capture these stories, honor these stories, amplify these stories, but also try to mine these stories for ways to thrive abroad. And I think I've been able to do that. I'm really proud. I launched it in May 2020. So we're 5 years in. I have over 150 episodes, 6 seasons, award winning, critically acclaimed. And now I'm writing a book based off of it. And I've learned so much about how living abroad can be a pathway to wellness, but it's not a given, right? It's something that you have to cultivate. And I feel really grateful and super honored that I've been able to have, complete strangers be like, yeah, I will tell a portion of my life story for you to broadcast around the world. I feel super honored because it's like, it's such a great thing being a podcaster because it's permission to be nosy and people are like, go with it. I'm like, this is great. This is totally my thing.
I can totally agree with that. It is a permission to be nosy. I love that. Tell me some of your favorite stories that surprised you in this journey of podcasting. What have you learned along the way by interviewing guests that you can be nosy with?
I've learned so much. I've learned one, Blackness as an identity isn't monolithic. which I think intellectually we know that. But I think the way that Blackness is portrayed in the United States, it's very flattened. Like it's the Black community, even though our whole country is the size of a continent. So it's like, it stands to reason that there'd be different types of Blackness going on. But interviewing women who are from the United States, but also from diaspora, and understanding how Blackness, how they identify within their Blackness has been really interesting, right? Because then you understand that Blackness is very much not only something that is like the color of your skin and also cultural, but it also has to do a lot with society and how society perceives and receives you as well. And that also goes with womanhood, right? We know that womanhood isn't monolithic, but until you talk to other women who are womaning differently than you, and you're like, I didn't know I had that choice. That has been really incredible. But also, it's really interesting to create space to learn about people just making different, radically different decisions in their life than you. Things that I'd be like, no, girl, that sounds like a horrible decision, but I'm going to let you finish the story because I hope this ends in a good way. But like, be able to sit with that discomfort of other people having different choices, different motivating factors, right? That has been really amazing. And I think it's been really helpful for me as to evolve as a person, to be able to really hold space for people to make different decisions and live differently. So yeah, that has been really incredible. And I've learned so much. And I think also in the production of this podcast, I've learned so much. I've learned so much about storytelling. I've learned so much about the power of voice as well, because my podcast isn't an interview podcast, right? It is a personal narrative. So I come in and I do some voiceover to help guide the podcast along. You're hearing mostly my guest. You're hearing them tell their story. And I think that's really powerful because it's that intimacy that audio has. It feels very cozy. And it also just feels like, and I hope it feels as if me, the audience, and my guest are kind of all together, kind of just having this conversation. And that has been really, really life changing for me, that power. Also, I've learned so many different other things, right? I've learned about different people's feelings on belonging and why living outside their home country, they have felt the most belonging they've ever felt in their entire life. That has been eye opening. I think we know this also intellectually, but migration really changes not only your life, but like your lineage, right? Regardless if you have children or not, like you stepping out and going somewhere else really changes like the whole ecosystem. And I've been really privileged to hear a lot of stories about that. I'll give you one story that was really, when I think about it, I still get like emotional because it was a story with Nuria. And Nuria is this, I mean, she's so beautiful and she's this gorgeous smile and she lives in Portugal. And she tells me this story when I always ask people, like, tell me, start with your childhood. And she describes the story of her being born in the Canary Islands and then her parents moving to Cape Verde and then San Tome y Principe. And then she's moving to Gabon and she's moving all these places. And she speaks like 6 or 7 languages because she's moved to all these places. And I'm like, this is incredible. Wow. She's like, yeah, my mom needs to work. So she moved and moved and moved. And then she tells this story about how she is moving. It was just her and her mother, and they're traveling by foot. And they go with this man, and this man kidnaps them in this village. And she didn't realize they were kidnapped till she was there. And her mom was like, whoa, what's going on? And they had no way out. They didn't know where they were. And I think they got out because someone walked by and they were screaming. And she's telling the story of human trafficking. I didn't realize it until that point. And it was incredible because, in media, they have these stories about migration, particularly from Africa, struggle, strife, and why are you moving? And this is a story that is deeply affected me because humanized this migratory journey that we hear about, but it's all very statistics and whatever. And it obviously horrified me, but it was an incredibly impactful story that she shared, but also the fact that she thrived. Like this happened and she thrived. Like she still, I mean, she knows 7 languages. She moved to Spain. And at the time, because I think she was born maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, because of the Spanish law at the time, she didn't have a Spanish passport, right? Even though she was born in the Canary Islands. And so she also talks about the journey of her getting a European passport and how traveling now with her husband, like they go to Australia, all these places, and she's like, I love it because I go through the line and it's just they stamp it and I leave, and it's not this back and forth and all these different things that yes, we're both Black, yes, we're both women, but we have very different lived experiences. And learning more about her and her journey, it was just, I'm not giving it justice, honestly. I highly recommend, of course, shameless plug, listen to my podcast. I think it's season 1, episode 34, maybe, or around there. She has, she's a vegan chef now. She has a whole catering business. Like, it's just amazing. That's one of the stories that is like so impactful, but also tells you about like why these stories are important, why it's important for us to speak to each other, why it's important for us to not just read the media, but like to get the full picture, to resist the urge to flatten someone with a label. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And I will get the link to that episode and definitely have it in the show notes for anyone who's curious and wants to hear more of that story. I want to ask you, what is your plan for Flourish in the Foreign? Do you have a vision for the future? And what is that?
Yeah. So the podcast is currently on hiatus. I just finished the last season, season 6, in April of 2025. And so I'm enjoying not producing, but you're always kind of producing. That's kind of the thing. Like you're always learning about people, always chatting to people. But I am kind of taking the brand in a new direction. So I'm currently writing a book that's tentatively called Flourish the Foreign as well, but it's a book that really examines the intersection of Blackness, womanhood, migration, and wellness, and really asks the question, not only is living abroad a pathway to wellness for Black women, but can living abroad be a liberation praxis for Black women? And if so, how so? And I'm doing it in a kind of different way. I have some kind of letters to the reader. I have some interstitials there. I've done a lot of research about weathering and different migratory patterns to kind of utilize as guideposts as to how to actually flourish in the foreign, right? How, like, what are the components to flourishing? And so I'm looking at the Great Migration, which is the migration for Black Americans from the South to the North to the West. Not international, but foreign. Also looking at the Windrush generation, which is mostly Caribbeans leaving the Caribbean to go and rebuild the UK after the World War. And I'm looking at other kind of migratory movements to see like what are the components of thriving. And what I've kind of already kind of stumbled upon is that, you know, it's not for everyone. And I know that people don't necessarily want to hear that, but I firmly believe that like living abroad is not necessarily for everyone, especially if your, country is not in, war or something like that, where you're like, you have to leave. It's not necessarily for everyone. And I don't necessarily think that everyone will flourish or thrive abroad. And so I'm really examining that as a concept, and hopefully it'll be well received because it's not like head to Spain or uh, my 1,000 dates abroad or something like that, like dating abroad. But I think it's important. I think it's interesting. And for me, it's a natural progression from this podcast. And so I'm doing that. And then also, I have a Substack where I'm speaking more about my personal experience, but also talking more about the behind the scenes of building a brand abroad, right? Like I've done this all abroad, all remote. Like I don't really go to conferences at all. Even though this year I was like, maybe I should start going to them. And I've had lots of friends who are like, you don't need to go. You don't need to go to Chicago. And I'm like, okay. Like how to do that, how to have a robust and interesting and helpful professional community abroad, like how to cultivate that and how to build a brand that you're proud of when you are fully remote location dependent. So I'll be doing that as well in my Substack. And what else? I have a lot of other projects coming up too that I will announce later. But I have lots of things. The Flourish and Foreign brand ecosystem is growing, and I feel really grateful for it because again, I didn't necessarily plan this out. Even though I am a business strategist, I produced this as a pandemic project. I only thought my mom was going to listen to it, and at the time, my mom was actually stuck with me in my apartment in Barcelona because she came to visit and the borders closed. So I literally thought the lady the next room over was the only person that was going to listen to the podcast. And it has grown in such a profound way. I feel really blessed. I feel blessed about the people that it has impacted their lives. They have moved abroad. They have done so with intention. I feel blessed because it has also changed my professional trajectory and career. So yeah, that's what we have going on for Flourish So Foreign thus far.
And it's a lot. I want to ask a final question. What do you have to say to anyone who is thinking of moving abroad after your own life experiences and talking to many, many people about their experiences moving abroad? What advice do you have to share?
Gosh, so much. So you definitely cut me off. I will say this is that, speaking to over 100 Black women for my podcast and talking to so many other people who live abroad, I would say that it is vital that you are honest with yourself. You can lie to people. You can go abroad and be Carmen Sandiego if you want to. That's fine, but it is so important to be honest with yourself, good, bad, ugly, what have you. Be honest about what is working in your life currently, what's not working in your life, but the things that are not working in your life, how much of that is external and your environment so it'll clear up when you leave, and how much of that is your baggage which will follow you abroad. It's so important to be honest. It's so important to be honest about how you want to live your life. It's so important to be honest about that vision. And maybe it doesn't look neat or cute, or it's not aesthetic, it's not Instagram ready. That's okay. But it's vital for you to be honest with yourself because this is a major disruption in your life. I know that everyone's like, move abroad and you'll be drinking sangria on a terraza, but this is the thing. Living abroad has the really interesting effect of bringing all of you to the surface. And I think it has something to do with the fact that you are in such a foreign environment where you knew things were going to be different, but you didn't know how different. And even all of your assumptions that you didn't feel were like, I didn't feel like this was American. I thought this was just how it was. It's like, no, that's American. Like all of those things are going to bring you up to the surface. And so it's vital that you know who you are and that you select a place that's going to nurture who you are. It's understandable that you may have visions of you being your best self abroad. I always tell people, let's not aim that high. Okay. My best self would, I don't know, meditate for an hour every day. I meditate for 10 minutes almost every day. And I usually skip at least 2 every week. Like my advice is for you to think about who you are, like the most delicious version of yourself. The version of yourself where you're like, I love all these things that are happening. For example, the delicious version of me, like a sumptuous version of me is I am hosting like a dinner party or some type of event. And I am kind of, milling around, pouring people like a little bit of, champagne. They're like, no, like just a little bit. There you go. And then have you met this person? Have you do this? And like, that's part of like my most sumptuous version of myself. So from that, I know that I want to be in a culture and in a society that values community in that way. How Spain does community and socializing is different than how Norway does community and socializing. And I think those are things that seem obvious, but people, I think, romanticize a little bit too much, right? They think about, I'm moving to Paris because I love crepes and baguettes. And it's like, if I move to France, it wouldn't be to Paris. It'd probably be like to south of France, because that's a little bit more in alignment with who I am and what I want to do and the things that nurture me, right? Being in a society that's very social, and does hospitality really well is important to me. I'm Southern, I'm also Caribbean. So hospitality is like a really big thing for me. I went to my very first Spanish lunch on a Sunday, which is a very big deal to get invited to. And I mean, we had like the olives, and we had like, aperitivo, and then we had a little drink, and then we had the courses, and we had another course, and then we had maybe another one, and then we were drinking champagne, and then we're like, oh, we'll have coffee. Then we had coffee, and then we had cordials. Then we had a little bit of, cake. Then we had like more pastries. And they're like, have a little chupita, a little shot. And the lunch started at 1:30, and I didn't leave full and tipsy till 7:30. For some people, that's an absolute nightmare. I'm an introvert as well, right? But I love that I was in someone's home. They hosted me in such a beautiful way. Like, that's a reflection of the sumptuous version of me, right? That's the biggest advice I have to give people. Know yourself for real. Living abroad is not going on a wellness retreat, okay? Be real with yourself. If you're like, I love television, I want to watch television, hey, watch television. Whatever it is, like, don't think that you're going to go abroad and all of a sudden you're going to be a yogi. If you've never been a yogi, you don't have to be. There's other ways to move your body, right? Especially if you move to Europe, there's so much green space. People just walk. Like, you don't have to do these things, but it's so imperative for you to be real with yourself, be honest with yourself, so that you can then choose a place that's going to nourish you, so that you can then cultivate a life well lived abroad.
That is the perfect way to end. Where can anyone find you that wants to connect with you, Christine?
Yeah, you can find me at flourishintheforeign.com for the podcast and all of the products and services attached to the podcast. You can learn more about me personally and professionally at christinejob.com. And I mean, I have socials, but just go to the website. That's what I would prefer, because socials, no. Also, I'll say this, the podcast is available across all platforms, even on YouTube. So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a great conversation. I knew it was going to be good, but this was really good. You went really deep. You were so insightful. And I'm just so grateful that you were here and shared all of insights.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your wonderful questions, because you definitely asked me questions that I hadn't been asked before, which I always appreciate. So thank you.
And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review. It will really help others find us. And if you're dreaming about a life abroad or already living it, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram at bargainhomesabroad, or on our website, www.bargainhomesabroad.co. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you back in the armchair soon. Bye-bye.